Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us today. My name is Natalie Boyum, and I'm the president and founder of the Defeating Epilepsy Foundation. We are a 501c3 in Southern California, and our mission is to provide the advocacy and educational resources needed to the epilepsy community and our society. Today, our guest is Mary Ellen Gambon. Mary Ellen is a journalist and was diagnosed with epilepsy after an accident. Despite developing epilepsy, Mary Ellen went on to obtain a college education. She has a dual bachelor's in journalism and has achieved 2 master's degrees. Mary Ellen has worked as a journalist and has had her work published in several papers and uses her talent to advocate for the disability community. Thank you, Mary Ellen, for joining me today.
Oh, thank you so much for having me, Natalie. I'm very thrilled to be here.
Awesome, thank you. Out of the 3.4 million Americans who are battling epilepsy, 70% can control their seizures with medication. Many of the 70% have faced employment discrimination and find it hard to obtain long-term gainful employment. Many must hide that they have epilepsy in fear of being terminated. We must work together and advocate for those battling epilepsy to be able to have productive careers and lives. We cannot allow the stigma associated with epilepsy to prevent us from succeeding in life. Mary Ellen, when you were diagnosed with epilepsy, what effect did it have on you?
Oh, at first, when I was diagnosed, I was a bit devastated. I actually knew someone who was in high school with me who had epilepsy, and I saw the way that people didn't understand her. We were in choir together, and she fell off of a riser and had a seizure, and no one knew what to do. And within 1 year, I was diagnosed myself. And I was very concerned about trying to pursue the degree in journalism, knowing that I might not be able to drive. It was very disheartening. Luckily, my mother was a nurse previously and was a pharmacy technician. She was able to figure out that this was a neurological condition and not just stress, and be able to get me the care that I needed so that I would feel comfortable being in the dorms at college and succeeding, and just advocating for myself, and eventually traveling to DC for internships.
No, and that's awesome. I feel that too many people don't have a close advocate that they truly need to be able to still achieve their goals despite being diagnosed with epilepsy. So it's awesome that your mother had the education to recognize what was going on and knew how to put together a plan so that you could achieve the goals you want.
Oh, yeah, I'm forever grateful to her. She's been gone 22 years now, but if I didn't have her, I wouldn't be the woman who I am.
Oh, that's awesome. Can you tell our viewers about your experience in college and what you did to achieve your goals?
Oh, yes. Well, I attended Boston University on academic scholarship, and I was able to pursue a dual degree program in journalism and political science. And it was really just trying to inform people what the condition was, being honest with my professors, saying, at this point, I have complex partial seizures. So if I look like I'm staring out into space, I am not ignoring you. Just please understand, try to work with me. I ended up joining the choir, made a lot of friends that way. And people were very accepting once I was able to get this through. But this was in the early 90s, before medications and technology and such, and the vagus nerve stimulator. So every once in a while, I would hit a bump in the road. I know, being in the dorms, I had a roommate from Asia, and she would be doing phone calls at 3 o'clock in the morning. I had to say, please turn off the lights. I can have seizures. And
Yeah.
that was a challenge. So it was just very hard at points, just to get people to understand the noise from the other dorms was giving me seizures. So I would go home for the weekends to recuperate.
Yeah, well, I don't think people realize how much sleep deprivation has an impact on people with epilepsy. I know myself having insomnia from lamotrigine, how hard it can be to try some find balance and making sure you get a decent night's sleep so that your body doesn't stress out. And it does, something I'm sure she was probably calling family and wasn't thinking about trying to cause you to be sick, but it is those little things that they just add up, and people are oblivious to it, not trying to be mean, but it's the lack of education about it.
Oh, of course. That's why I tried to reach out anytime, I had roommates, just explaining, and then I would just go home if things didn't work out. I ended up petitioning to be put in a quiet house
Yeah.
with a single, just so that I wouldn't have to, you know, impact anyone else's life too, because I'm very sensitive to other people's conditions and what they want to do with their lives and don't want to infringe on them, but I still want my rights recognized.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, that was the one thing I was lucky. My last year of my undergrad, I lost my license due to having a seizure, and I had to live on dorm because I didn't have family who could take me out on a daily basis to my classes. And so, I explained to them, if you put me in a dorm where you had to, the way the school was the first year you were there as a freshman, you were required to live on dorm. So think of a bunch of 18, 19-year-olds who are now free from mom and dad, acting all crazy, tearing the place apart, screaming. I'm like, if you put me in an environment like that, you're going to be calling an ambulance. There's no getting around it. I need to be in a quieter environment. And at that time, I didn't know, but the school owned a number of homes by Delaware Park that had been turned into offices, and some of the people who actually worked for the university were living there, was part of their contract to be close to the school. So it was really nice. They gave me an apartment, and I had a roommate who we're still best of friends to this day, despite graduating almost 20 years ago. And it made such a difference to have my own, almost like a little apartment, rather than being in a room with somebody else and having, them having their crazy moments and parties and stuff in the building.
Oh, yes, that's what I'm really grateful for too, just to be able to have that flexibility where I could get a single and be able to live life on my terms without infringing on anybody else's rights. I know it's college and people want to break free, but I think there needs to be a mutual respect that people don't always get at 18 or 19.
Oh yeah. No, I mean, none of us were angels, but I
No.
where I was in Buffalo, a lot of the kids who came I was really lucky. I went to a private university. I won some scholarships, so I really had an experience of being in a smaller school and not be at a state university, which had tens of thousands of people, and on a global level, it was a huge school. So it was nice to be in a much smaller environment, but a lot of the kids came from very conservative families. Well, both of us being from the East Coast, I grew up in a more of Italian Sicilian community, very devout Catholic community. So think of a bunch of rebellious Catholic teenagers coming from what was it, Canisius, which was a Catholic-based private school, and now they're free. So the level of
Yeah.
rebellious that could come with that.
Oh my God. That's what I was encountering too, just being very straight laced, living at home with my mother and grandmother. We all sat in the pews, one, two, three. And then you go into this other environment where people are running in the halls and screaming, and it just wasn't flying with me. But once I got the single, I was able to pursue the dual degrees. I actually petitioned to get my master's because they had a Bachelor of Arts, Master of Arts program, as well as the BA, BS program, and they wouldn't let me do it. They said, you can't
Oh,
get that much for free. But I says, I crafted my own degree program for, Washington political journalism.
oh, that's awesome.
But they said,
Yeah.
well, you can get your two and go back to Washington to do another internship. And I was really grateful to be at President Clinton's and viewing his inauguration from the bridge to be able to get that access.
Oh, that sounds like a life experience and then some. That is awesome.
Yeah, it was just amazing. And even the first internship I did was actually at my first interview for the newspapers was at the White House. So that's memories I'll cherish forever because of BU's understanding.
No, that really is awesome. So, along with being an epilepsy advocate, you advocate for all disabilities. Can you tell our supporters some of the things you have done to help those disabled in Boston?
Oh, yes, absolutely. Yeah, I actually have mobility impairments as well from the same bus accident where I developed the concussion that led to the epilepsy. So I'm very conscious of transportation issues and access issues. So I had lived in an disabled community in part of Boston called West Roxbury, the MBTA, the Transit Authority, had removed the bus stop across from our community, and we would have had to walk to a neighboring town outside of Boston to be able to access the bus just to get to the mall for shopping, etc. And it made no sense to me. So I was able to go to the mayor's office, the city council, and the transit authority and just say, you call this the Better Bus Project, but you never consulted the community that you're impacting. And as a disabled woman, I don't think that's correct.
Oh,
So the mayor's
absolutely.
office worked with me and said, okay, why don't we work to put the bus stop almost where it was, right in front of a Dunkin' Donuts? I said, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. They've seen an uptick in their business. The people from our building go there now more often because they're there. And they said, well, what else would you like, Mary Ellen? I said, well, a bench would be nice because we have mobility issues and disabilities and elders, and we can't stand for 45 minutes to an hour to wait for a bus.
No.
So there's a bench now in front of the Dunkin' Donuts, and I always kind of call that my sweet spot in the city.
Oh, yeah. And you know what's nice about that? A lot of people don't realize, at least in Niagara Falls, where my family is. I lived in Buffalo and they stayed in Niagara Falls. My father is self-employed as an insurance agent. And what they'll do, I don't know if they do in Boston, would be something to consider taking to the mayor and city council. But what they'll do is the small businesses in the area who are advertising, they can put advertisement on the bench, and by paying for the marketing, it helps pay for a lot of stuff like that. So rather than them saying, well, the city doesn't have funding like that, we don't have money to put into stuff like that, they can find little tricks and ways to make money to take care of situations like that, to help people with mobility issues who would need a bench to sit on.
Yes, and it was just crazy. I know just on my own floor, we had several people who use wheelchairs. And I said, it's just not really fair that people would have to roll all the way to another community outside of Boston when they can have the access right in front of their door.
Oh, absolutely. And you know what I find, even though the ADA has been in effect since 1990, a lot of places still don't follow the ADA guidelines when it comes to, if you look at the streets, some do where they have it where people with wheelchairs can roll across no problem. But I find like it's like that at the main intersections. But if you look at some of the more residential areas that people go through, they haven't complied with ADA, and the curbs do not come down for people with wheelchairs. So how can you expect people who unfortunately have to be in a wheelchair or have mobility issues where maybe they can't step up onto the curb? How are they supposed to get to the bus? How are they supposed to get to buying their groceries or getting to a doctor's appointment if the city is structured like that?
Yes, and that leads to another project I've been advocating on this year is the reconstruction of a major intersection. It's in the neighborhood of Roslindale, and it's just we call it the octopus because there is 5 streets that cut in different angles in a major intersection pretty much before you get to a shopping plaza. But it's in my old neighborhood, and some of the streets are tar and pockmarked and slanted, so people who use wheelchairs or myself with a cane would end up tripping in the holes and falling.
Oh my goodness.
It was ridiculous. When you get to that main intersection, they had some crosswalks that were brick, and of course, that wasn't the best way to cross. They were uncoordinated. So I had been working with one of the city councilors, Councilor Flaherty, just to say, we really need funding this cycle to improve this because it's a quality of life issue. It's an access issue, even for parents with strollers. If the stroller tips, you're injuring a child.
Oh yeah. No, absolutely. There are so many factors that come into that. So no, it's actually good that you're bringing that to the table for the city and the council, because I don't think they're always trying to be neglectful. I don't think it's intentional at all. But I think it's because a lot of people who are able-bodied can't think outside the box and see, well, this works for me. but it may not work for somebody else. And if it doesn't work for somebody else, what steps or solution do we take to make it work for everybody? And I don't think they're trying to intentionally discriminate. I don't think they're intentionally trying to cause harm. I think the thought of adapting or making change, I think they just don't know where to go with it, if that makes sense.
Oh, yes. That was actually the genesis of how this project came about. There was a group called Walk Up Roslindale who was doing a walk audit. I was doing a story on that. And I said, well, I will participate because I want to see what this is like from my lens. And they just, when I brought the data back, the pictures that I showed them said, this is difficult for me. I almost got hit 3 times on a photo shoot because people were going through the crosswalk on a red light,
Oh
that
my
they had no
goodness.
concept because they were more concerned about people who, they wanted more bike lanes and such. I said, but a lot of us in that neighborhood are disenfranchised, people of color, elders, people with disabilities who can't use a bike.
Yeah.
So if you could look from this lens as well, I would appreciate that because there's a lot of challenges that you don't see if you're used to hiking and such. But for everyday life, carrying 5 bags of groceries, it's not cutting it.
Yeah. No, and
Uh,
that makes sense, but it's good that you can bring that suggestion, those ideas to the table for them, because I think long term, if they make more of the effort to take those things in consideration, it helps the community in so many ways because it helps elder people, disabled people be able to integrate more into society. And we really need that. I find that's maybe one of the biggest frustrations I've had with epilepsy is when I couldn't drive and I didn't have a reliable form of transportation unless I had a loved one or a friend take me somewhere. People end up becoming isolated and staying in their homes, and then it causes complications to their condition. Don't I mean, okay, we're starting with epilepsy, but now that they're alone, they're depressed, they're lonely, or they're anxious. After a while being in the house for so long, they have to go somewhere and be around others. They feel anxiety. So it's like it adds on. I think people don't understand how epilepsy is a comorbid disease, and so many things can tie into it and complicate it. And just a simple resource as making the area up to ADA standards so they can get out and walk to the grocery store, or they could take the bus or train and get down what they need and do that on a regular basis. It helps their overall well-being, and it helps us to have a more diversified community.
Oh, absolutely. That's why I got so active. I actually engaged the city's disability commission in the study as well and in the article process. And because I invited them in, they actually went for funding for the Department of Public Works to put toward the redesign of the intersection. Councilor Flaherty's working on his end. And it would just make so much more sense because it allows people with different conditions to be more engaged and active in society and feel like the community actually cares about them, which has been absent for so long, despite the ADA being in effect in 1990.
Oh, absolutely. And Tony Colijo, who is the primary author of it, one of my mentors is friends with him, and we were talking about an article that was written about Tony in Forbes magazine. He's still trying to strengthen it all these years later. What they're trying to do now with the advancements in technology for people who are visually impaired, they're having a hard time seeing the screen. And now with the advancements, it's so many people buy their groceries online, they pay their bills online, they order their medicines online. We're going down a path where technology is becoming a normalcy in our life. It's a point where no matter what you're dealing with, some level of degree, technology is part of your life. And if you're visually impaired and can't see the screen or have other complications, how are you to function with that?
Oh, absolutely. Even right now, being able to do a Zoom is just an incredible advancement that helps me in my career. But if you have a visual impairment, what do you do?
Exactly. So
And then
I
some people
feel
don't
like,
have the resources for the internet, so that makes it challenging as well. You can provide a Chromebook to a child for schooling, but if they don't have access to the internet, then it's really not helpful and not conducive.
yeah, exactly. But what subjects do you write about as a journalist?
Oh, I do the gamut, and the main topic that I do is covering the politics of the neighborhoods and things such as zoning and different developments that are going up, different political races. We're involved in a big mayor's and city council race right now that I'm covering. But I've also done a lot of reporting on the arts. I used to volunteer for an online arts magazine where I interviewed, some talented musicians, artists, dancers. And I just try to have a well-rounded approach to things that I cover. And right now I'm covering the development of solar farms in Hopkinton.
Oh,
So it's
neat.
yeah, it's just amazing to be able to learn about how the growth of plants underneath the panels is affecting the runoff, and just all of the things that we think are environmentally friendly in one way may not be in another respect.
Oh, no, and that's very true. No, that's neat. It sounds like you've had a lot of experience in many different areas. And myself, as I'm not a journalist, but as a researcher, I've been working on a paper with a professor of mine, and I love the opportunity to research because so many people think, oh, okay, you're an expert. And I never really want to label myself an expert because I find as I research, I learn something new all the time. You grow from it. So that's why to label saying, I don't like to be called an expert because people are going to assume, well, you know it all. And as humans, I feel we don't know everything. We can learn and we can grow and develop, but, we're on our own journeys with what we're following. So it's really awesome that you've taken so many different approaches in your career about learning things and bringing the information to the viewers. I think it really helps to open people's eyes to see, what is going on in society and taking place.
Oh, yeah, it's just been a fascinating experience for me just to always be learning and growing. And even now, I'm covering a lot of racial justice issues and kind of intertwining that with, disability issues, saying, our lives matter as well, so I can understand the struggle.
I'm really glad to hear that because that's one of the challenges I've actually had. We have now, because sadly where I live, there's a very negative history of racism out here, particularly against African Americans and Mexicans. And so right now they're very dedicated to the BIPOC community, which is so overdue. I'll be the first to admit it. It is so overdue. But at the same time, they'll be having these diversity events, and I'll say, may I come as well, take part? And they're looking at me like, well, what do you have to do with diversity? And I'm
Mhm.
like, I'm part of the disabled community. If you're diversifying and trying to bring different people together, race is just one factor. You have different ethnicities. You have people who practice different faiths who may have not been accepted. You have people in the disability community. You have people in the LGBTQ community. We can't just pick and choose a few groups that we feel will fall under the label of diversity and then exclude others.
Yeah, that's the challenge I face now. I'm so glad about the Black Lives Matter movement, as he said, and the focus on BIPOC. But when can we all be having a seat at the table? Like LGBTQIA, I see more outreach now, especially with Pride Month. But what
Yes.
happens when that month is over? And I know nobody's going to know when Epilepsy Month is to invite me
Yes.
to a seat. And people just look at me and my color and just say, well, how could you be discriminated against? But I have been in employment, even in government.
Hmm.
I had to lose jobs. So I feel the struggle, and that's why I'm so passionate about covering it. But if people could understand our struggle as well, it would be so helpful to know that we're all in this together.
Oh, absolutely. Well, do you find that despite having epilepsy, you are able to be independent?
Oh, yes. That's one thing I kind of cherish about having a disability is that it makes me think outside of the box. So I know with the major newspapers, they won't let me work there because I don't drive a car, but I take Uber everywhere. I take the bus, I walk. I can still do everything that everyone else does and win awards for it, but I just didn't fit into their neat little category. So I've been able to branch out through community journalism, and I had studied to be a political and foreign correspondent, but I just feel like I'm placed where I need to be at this moment in time to get these issues to the table.
And I think that's really awesome because I feel not enough people focus on community, and that's why we have a lot of these sadly these situations that really need to be addressed.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, we're all one community and we really need to get the voices out. There's been a lot of issues with development and exclusion, and just making sure that people know the avenues they can take, how to approach their officials, what their officials are thinking. They may not know without decent coverage. They might just see a Facebook post, which could be skewed to one campaign or another.
Yeah. No, that's very true. So what would you say to our viewers today when it comes to battling epilepsy and achieving higher education?
Oh, I would just say go for your dreams. You are worthy. You have so much to offer the world. The colleges and even employers that I've had have been more flexible. It doesn't need to be a hindrance, it can be a strength because you can think in more creative ways to adapt. You can bring skills to the table and empathy that a lot of people may not have that could be so useful.
Oh, absolutely. And I think that's one of the biggest things is being able to critically think outside the box because of us having to do our best to adapt society, but also being able to have empathy for those who may be going through similar situations like us or be less fortunate. We can understand what it's like to be in that spot throughout times in our lives. And I think that's really important. Myself, advocating the one thing I'm really passionate of working on with education is helping people not just achieve higher education, but let's say they can't go to college, how to learn a trade or start a small business. What other options are there for them to be productive in society? And I feel the one big concern we have to do to be able to bridge that so that more people with epilepsy and other disabilities can succeed is learning about the educational system in America. The K-12 program does a great job. It really depends on what school you're in. The laws, the guidelines that have been put in place are very good. It's trying to find a healthy environment for these children to be in, and that's why I'm really advocating for it because having FAPE, which is free access to public education, having the IDEA Act to help individuals with disabilities be able to have the same rights as able-bodied children, having individual education plans put in place, these are all awesome, and they should be, any student with epilepsy should fall under them. Where my frustration is once you get out of the K-12 program, those protections for the education plan, IDEA Act, FAPE, they're no longer there. Once they're 18 and out of the K-12 system, they're gone. Now, when they go to college, yes, you still have ADA protection, but if you need accommodations, it's like jumping through hoops, trying to get, if you need more time for a test, or my situation, migraines were a trigger for my seizures. When the weather would be changing from fall to winter and spring to summer, when the barometric pressure would be changing, it triggered my migraines, which triggered my seizures. And trying to get the school to waive the attendance policy for me just in case I had a seizure, it was such a struggle to the point where I say the majority of my professors were very understanding and sympathetic. They saw that despite having a disability, I was there to do something with my life. I wasn't going to allow a stigma to stop me from surviving. But I did have a couple who were like, well, I can't bend the rules for the other students, so why should I bend them for you? And I said, one,
Mm.
I'll be lucky if I can get out of bed with the migraine. And let's say I do get out of bed and get here. What are you going to do if I have a convulsion in the middle of the class?
Yes.
And the moment I put it there, like, do you want me to come and have a seizure when you're trying to teach in front of everybody? Now, the moment I put it like that, it registered. But I mean, even when my doctor gave the letter for it and I filled out the forms for it, people still tried to get around that. And that's one of the biggest frustrations. And then even when I did have a seizure at school, instead of saying, okay, we need to step up to the plate so that she can finish school, the director of disability called me into her office, put her hand on my hand, and went, honey, not everybody is college material. And this is somebody who's supposed to be advocating for my protection. So I have the right to go to school, trying to chase me out of the school. And sadly, 20 years later, when I went for my master's, the school I went to for my master's, I was hearing the same stories from the undergrads there. And I just couldn't get over it. And I mean, in my situation, when she did that to me, I pulled my hand away from her and went, guess what, honey? I am. And this May, I'm walking across stage. And of
Mm.
course I did.
Yes,
Of course I did.
exactly.
But there's so many where there really is not the trained professionals who understand invisible illnesses. And then these students get put in this situation like mine, like, oh, maybe you shouldn't be in college. Maybe you shouldn't be trying to do this. Not everyone should have. And then they complain why people like you and I, oh, why should I have to pay for SSDI? Why should they be on my taxes? Well, why shouldn't we be given the opportunities to be productive human beings in society then? Why should we be labeled and discouraged from it?
Yeah, that's what I've been advocating for my whole adult life. Even going to school for journalism, the classroom for Com 101 wasn't ADA compliant with the stairs that you had to climb to get to the seats. I went back a couple of years ago for an investigative reporters and editors conference, and it's the same room.
Yeah.
There's been no modifications at a major university, and I found that very disheartening. I actually fell.
Oh my
And,
gosh.
and just to think that this is the same place where I started my career preparation and it still isn't accommodating. And why is that? Because they think that people with disabilities can't be journalists. And we can all remember what happened with our former president making fun of a disabled journalist.
Oh, and that sent my blood pressure through the roof when that happened. That was just, it was beyond wrong. And the fact, I think
Yeah.
what just hurt me at that moment, I mean, I don't have the visible illness, I don't have the visible disability, but the fact that the moment he put his hand like that and started doing that, and a whole stadium full of people breaking out laughing, I was embarrassed for our nation at that moment. I thought of anyone in the on the rest of this earth who watched that. What were they what were they thinking about us as Americans?
Yes, it's so disheartening. We're supposed to be so progressive and the country where everyone is supposed to be welcome, to be disparaged like that. It's just unconscionable to someone like me who's worked so hard to break out of the stigmas. And yes, I use a cane so people can see that there is something wrong, but a lot of times it just doesn't resonate and people make fun. And I just think it's a very horrible thing because I have to work harder than everyone else.
Yes. No, I agree with you. See, okay, I have found working in my profession that some people doubt my abilities due to having epilepsy. Have you found you've had the similar experiences in the workforce?
Oh my goodness. I have a ton of them, and some of them are very painful. I actually report in my hometown where I had been on a previous newspaper 25 years before. So I went to a community meeting and there was a gentleman there and said, well, gee, I remember when your mother came up to me when you couldn't make a meeting 25 years ago, said you were in a coma. So I'm going to tell everyone that you're not capable of writing because you're mentally impaired. And I said
Oh
to him,
my gosh.
yes. And he's not the only one from that group who has said things like that to me. So I just said, hey, look at, guess what? I was in a coma. I woke up. When will you?
I love it. I love it.
I
Absolutely.
couldn't hold back anymore because I was tired of being stigmatized. Even this year earlier, we had a city council candidate, and I take notes. I do my own form of shorthand. I've been doing that for 25 years. So that's just the way I roll, and it helps me to remember as a person with epilepsy. So she came up to me in a public forum with other reporters there and said, "Oh, does your boss have to type your articles for you?" in this robotic tone. And I was horrified. I have
Oh
3
my God.
degrees going on to a second master's. I said, I don't think I had a stenographer in college, so I think I am okay.
I love it. I won't lie, I would have broke out laughing right there and then.
I had to go a little bit off the rails, but then people will say, "Oh, well, she's got a mental disorder, so she's going batty." And you can't win for trying with some people, trying to move the needle. To be fair,
Yeah.
all I want is equity.
No,
You
it's
don't
the
have to like
truth.
me, but you can respect me, and I'll respect you back. But it's really hard sometimes to cover people who are just so stuck in this mindset. I've even been discriminated against in church. And I lost a previous job because of epilepsy because I had had a seizure in a restaurant, and the state senator told me I was an embarrassment to the office.
Oh my God.
So I know what people go through. I know why they're afraid to admit the disability to an employer because I've been in that situation as well. It's not the only job where I face job discrimination,
Yeah.
but luckily I found some, especially in recent years, where it didn't matter. My main employer now, they had had an ad in the newspaper that said must have car no exceptions. I happened to meet the gentleman who's my boss at a community meeting and had told a friend, well, I wish I were a reporter again. So he pulled me to the side and said, "Why didn't you apply for us?" I said, "It's because of your ad." So he actually said, "I don't give a blank if you have epilepsy. You've got chops. Give me your resume tomorrow in 3 clips." And I was
Oh
already on
wow.
the freelance list. So it's good to see that someone is more understanding, and that's led to other opportunities where people are accepting of me.
And that's what I really try to do with my organization right now because we're so small. We're all working on a volunteer basis. Myself, I'm volunteering my time until we can grow enough revenue where I feel then I can still fund my projects the way I need to, but then also take a small level of an income. But I have a number of students who volunteer where they have a loved one with epilepsy, they have epilepsy. I have couple who have had brain surgery for other reasons and had experienced seizures before they had their surgery. So it's really wonderful that I'm able to attract students who understand what it's like to go through these things, or they've had loved ones and want to, it's their way of showing, they care and they know what it's like. They've seen someone that goes through it. But I think the one thing I really love is for our blog articles, I bring on mainly psychology and pre-med students, and I make it so clear to them that, what happened years ago in today's time when it comes to disabilities, it's unacceptable. And you are going to come across someone in your career who's going to have epilepsy or autism, MS, some type of neurological disorder. And if they have triggers due to past trauma, what you may perceive as a normal reaction is not a normal reaction for them. And when they react in a different way, the best thing you can do, and I feel medical schools, professional schools don't teach it, is before you react as a professional, take a couple seconds to say, why are they reacting that way? And what can I do to help them feel secure? Because obviously at this moment, they don't feel secure or safe where they are. How can I reassure them I'm here to help and not hurt or make them feel like they're less of a human being than me? I said, just that little bit of empathy and how you respond to them. You may not be able to be in their shoes, but showing some level of compassion and care, I go, can make your career so different? I go, it can, the word would go around, and I said, if you're known as a doctor or a therapist who takes 1 or 2 extra moments just to listen so they don't feel you don't care, I said that can really attract people to wanting to be your patient or client, or attract even better job opportunities to show your record.
Oh, absolutely. It's just so critical just to have that extra step, and it's not hard.
No.
The thing that gets to me is even in the medical community, I've been denigrated for some of the care that I need. And I said, look, I'm expressing myself articulately. Yes, I have these conditions, but this is why I need you.
Yes.
And it's just, if you could just take the extra step and say, well, gee, she's anxious. No, it's not that I'm anxious. It's that I am frustrated at this point. I know I have an anxiety disorder, but it's, comorbid with the epilepsy. It's not something that I asked for, but I'm dealing with it in a professional way, and I'd appreciate that same respect.
Yeah. No, absolutely. Do you, do you have any future career or educational goals?
Oh, yes. I'm actually in the process of writing a book right now.
Oh, awesome.
Yeah, I'm really excited about it. I'm finally getting my fingers to the keyboard just to get my life story and the experiences that I've had as a disabled woman and journalist into the forefront, just to show people it's not to stand up and cry about what's happened to me or put myself on a pedestal, but just to show people that these are the things that I have encountered. I've found ways to work around them. There are some groups around that are helpful, and please do not give up. And that's the
Yes.
message I want to convey. Is there's so many opportunities now. There are people who understand, like yourself. Don't give up. Keep pushing. You can get someone who will listen.
Yeah.
Just approaching my life with a sense of gratitude. I'm in a group called Gratitude Slam that's really helped to build me up as far as self-esteem and being able to articulate my goals where before I just felt ignored.
Yes. No, it's the absolute truth. I hope one of the things I like to do on my bucket list is write a book as well, and I'd like to do something similar like you're doing, but more for helping people gain confidence, knowing that no matter where we are in life as humans, there's times we're going to feel vulnerability. And normally most people in society feel that if you feel vulnerability, it means you're weak. And it's not. I think the way I look at vulnerability, I did an organizational leadership certification. And what I really liked about it is they point out that vulnerability is a normal emotion that we feel as we go through life and we make changes, whether it's in our personal life or our career development. There's always going to be a point where we feel vulnerable. And vulnerability is not a bad thing. It's, think of it as an opportunity. It's okay, you don't feel just right about something, take a step back and look at it from all angles before you make your decision on how to proceed with it and not be impulsive about it.
Yes, yes, absolutely. The Gratitude Slam group that I'm in, I'm actually in a higher level now where I'm training to be a life coach.
Oh,
And we're
awesome.
encouraged to be vulnerable, share our life experiences, and then to coach each other through the process of how does this make you feel? How can you come to a resolution about the conflict you're experiencing? What tools can you use to make it so that everyone understands on an even playing field?
Hmm. No, absolutely. What would you say to employers about hiring someone with epilepsy?
Oh, I would say, first of all, just please give us a chance to prove ourselves, because a lot of times I know if I put the organizations that I'm involved in regarding epilepsy, I find that I don't get a response. But if I don't, and then go to the interview and then mention it, or just when I know I'm going to be getting a job, it just will come up. And
Yeah.
just to say, if you want to know about the condition, I'm happy to explain things. I've been graced to be seizure free for a few years, but this is what you need to do to understand our culture. I can bring some passion and empathy to the table, as well as intelligence that you may not have seen because of the stigma you have of someone shaking on a floor
Yeah.
from a TV show. And it's so much more than that. It's so much more real. And there's so many facets to it that if you just give us the chance to prove ourselves, we can move mountains.
Oh God, yes. And that's one of the things working with the Chamber of Commerce that I've been trying to explain. I mean, I had a businessman here, and I mean, it was really what I really respected was his honesty, because he said, I don't want to discriminate against people, because I'm going to be honest with you. If you applied for a job, I'd be afraid to give you a job. Not because I doubt your talents, not because I don't doubt your capability. He goes, where my fear is, he goes, what if you had a seizure on the job and got hurt? I don't want to get sued. What if you have a seizure in front of one of my clients and my clients say I'm hiring people like you and I lose my business? And that's when I found, I mean, I've been so grateful that many entrepreneurs have pros and cons about it. Some will hire and some have admitted, he admitted to me, he goes, it's not because I don't want to give people opportunity. He goes, it boils down to the attorneys. I'm so afraid of getting sued and it ending my, this is the way I take care of myself and my family. This is my support. I'll lose what I have to survive. And I mean, I couldn't be angry with him because I could see really what it would come down to would be educating him and training him for hiring people with invisible illnesses. So I don't think it's, at least from people I've interviewed, I don't think it's hate or wanting to discriminate, feeling people are less. I think a lot of it just comes down to fear from lack of education.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. That's what I've encountered in every journalism job that I've applied for, even my first job. I have a wonderful editor. We're still friends today. She says, I'm really afraid to hire you, even though have won a national fellowship, etc. And I says, just please judge me for now on my abilities, not on the disability. I know I don't have a car, but I'm taking the bus. I'm paying for my own cab fares. You don't have to worry. I have insurance. I'm not looking to sue you, but just let me prove myself. I even had my mother, when she was alive, I busted a prostitution ring in one of our neighborhoods because I had my mom drive me. I said, I'm willing to work out of the box if you just give me a chance.
Yeah. And thankfully many have. Thankfully many have seen your talents and you have the ability to be gainfully employed. And I hope that in time stories like yours and other people who are really trying to make something of their lives in this community, I hope it will bring one confidence to our community, because I find the fear that so many have about our condition because of the stigma, it gets pressed onto us. And that's when I find people have fear of taking the next step or even have self-doubt. Do they really have the ability to take the next step? And I can understand where they get those emotions from, because myself, when my seizures were not controlled, my doctor didn't believe. I had a horrible neurologist. He didn't believe in me. The
Mm.
attitude was, he's like, you need to go on disability. And I said, I'll die before I live off your tax dollars. No, I know I can get this under control. Stop doubting me. And I finally had to leave him. And when I went to my neurologist, he was the last one I had before I left Buffalo, and he was wonderful. But I remember the first time I met him, and he looked at my chart and he went, "Well, you're an interesting person." And I said, "Let me guess. I failed to comply with treatment and I'm difficult to work with." He goes, "Yeah, you summed it up." I said, "Well, here's the deal. I want to be seizure free the rest of my life. I want to work, I want to drive, and I never want to live off of you." And the moment I put that way, he's like, I think we can make this work. I'm like, well, of course we can make it work. I go, I'm not a bad person. I go, stubborn. You can hold that one against me. I'm stubborn, but I'm not bad. And I feel it comes down to, if you have the support from family, colleagues, friends, your doctor, it really helps to build up your energy and momentum and confidence to be able to say, yeah, I didn't get dealt the best hand in life, but I'm not going to fold my hand and settle and go, well, what if I had done something? You realize through growing and life experiences and being willing to adapt to things, you can take that bad hand you got dealt and turn it into a winning hand and do what you can to make the most of life. And I hope in time, as I find the younger generation of doctors coming in now are actually taking a more holistic approach. They're not just focusing on medicine, but on mental health care. Will nutrition helps? They're taking a look at so many things. I find the younger doctors I'm talking to now, they love the thought of telemedicine because they rather have a telemedicine session with them so the patient is in the comfort of their home, is more relaxed, and they can communicate better. And I'm hoping as this is happening that our community will be able to say, you know what, I got this. It's not going to suppress
Mhm.
me anymore. I got this. But I
Oh,
just have found we've been forgotten for so long.
oh, it's so true. I mean, even right now, I'm very encouraged. My physical therapist is meeting with me virtually, so I can actually show her the layout of my home. This is the exercise bike. This is what I'm doing. And it's so much more conducive to getting well. I've been in leaps and bounds because
Yeah.
she was willing to take that understanding. And I would hope that all of the medical practitioners would. I had been seeing a social worker in the neurology department at one point, and I had been advocating for a better housing situation. And he actually told me to sleep with someone to get housing. And that's not the kind of care that we need.
Oh my goodness.
One of the best neurological hospitals in the country. And to hear something like that, I went right to the director of the hospital and said, you really can't do this. This is just so unjust.
Oh, it is. And I mean, Boston, I mean, I've never worked with Boston University or the hospital myself, but a couple of advocates I know, the one daughter had her RNS put in at Boston Children's Hospital. I have another one who's looking to take her son up there. And
Oh,
just the stories that I've heard come out of Boston when it comes to care, I mean, it's top of the line. I mean, I've just heard nothing but the best. So many people rallying behind it because they get on things. So to hear that a social worker would say that to you after all the positivity, oh my God, I'm so sorry.
and
You didn't
oh,
deserve to be talked to like that.
yeah, and he actually told me that I should go to a shelter for 10 days to improve my chances of getting better housing. I said, how can I do that as a journalist with medication? Am I supposed to bring my laptop and hope that that and my medications don't get stolen? In
Exactly.
an animalistic type situation, I've had friends who are homeless, so they've told me about the experiences at the shelter.
They're
So
scary. They're very scary.
live with the stress level that I have that would induce the seizures. So for him to recommend that was just unconscionable to me.
Oh, it is. Because I mean, the problem we had in Buffalo was there wasn't really the funding for shelters, which was very dangerous. I mean, both of us being from the Northeast, we know how wonderful the winters are there. I mean, you become homeless in the wintertime, you're going to die from starvation, you're going to die from hypothermia, you could get pneumonia. You don't want to be homeless in the Northeast. I don't want one, I don't wish homelessness on anyone, but I especially growing up in a very cold, frigid environment, especially don't want anyone having to rely on being a shelter in an environment like that. That's oh my goodness.
I couldn't
But
believe he
that's
would
the
even
thing.
recommend that being at one of the best hospitals. And, I've had doctors who have kept me alive. I had been pronounced dead in 1995 and brought back from a induced coma after having my first status epilepticus episode. And then to say, I've come all this way in this day and age, and you're going to say that to me?
Oh, that's hurtful. I'm sorry.
It's
One, it's hurtful, and two, it's unprofessional. I can't imagine telling, if I was a social worker or a doctor or anything, telling a client who I know is battling a very difficult disability, oh, just go sit in a shelter for 10 days and figure it out. Hopefully, it'll increase your chances. Because, I mean, like you said, a lot of people there, because they're battling mental illness or drug addiction, they'll steal from you. Well, what if someone steals your seizure meds because they think they could sell them on the street, even though really that's not the purpose of them? That
Mhm.
that right there is a death sentence.
Absolutely. That's why I was so upset and just trying to advocate with the hospital to improve conditions. I had to leave that social worker, obviously, and find, a different venue. But I find that I do much more advocacy on my own. It's just getting people to take me seriously because of the stigma of the disability.
Yes.
And that's what's so frustrating. Even when I was reporting on an article, somebody said, "Well, I remember that you were in a coma 25 years ago." And I said, "Well, gee, I woke up. When were you? I just try to learn about what's going on. And I'm more than happy to educate you. That's what I'm here for. I felt like I've been given a purpose in this life because of that."
Well, how many people have been in comas for different reasons than epilepsy and they wake up, they recover, they go through therapy and they live their life. It was a bad patch they hit in their life in the road and they move on from it. So I mean, I'm so sorry the challenges that you faced because of the lack of education and what I would say arrogance of others, especially that politician talking to you like a robot, like you were. Oh, I don't
Yeah.
know why people think behavior like that is justifiable. And I admit I've experienced it myself in my own profession when I did my study abroad in South Africa. One of the adjunct professors that came, he was down in San Diego in venture capitalism. And I was discussing with a friend wanting to launch my foundation, the work I wanted to do. And he literally cut us off. He wasn't even part of the conversation. He cut us off and went, "Oh, and listen to you, what you're going to do. Like everyone finds everything so special." And I cut him back off and went, "There is nothing special going on what I'm doing. I am trying to help an underserved community that has been suppressed for generations. I'm like, would you rather I do this or live off of you?" And then, of course, he shut his mouth, thank God. But
Thank God for
it's
that.
yeah, it's like, how do you come back from that? But it's the same thing. It's like I can understand myself as a woman being in a profession. You get sick of being talked down to like you're supposed to be a good little girl. And it's like I find that I was telling a friend of mine, I said, I feel the reason I've been able to move up is even though I'm a woman, I have to have the attitude and mindset of a man. And I feel in this day and age, we shouldn't have to, but a lot of times we have to come off as assertive and independent and open minded and ready to take that risk and that challenge that to make our goals. And people, when I've done it, and I'm sure you've experienced, they either look at me one like I'm crazy, or two, I have an attitude or I'm too assertive or aggressive. And I just feel it's at the point where we're in the 21st century. Why, as women in careers, even though we have conditions that put us under disabilities, why should we be suppressed for wanting to survive and make a difference and have healthy lives?
Yes, absolutely. I go through this now, even just trying to advocate for stories that I'm going to cover. Oh, do you think this will be intense for you? I went to one school where there was a meeting that was canceled, and I said, I wish you could have just told me because I have to arrange for trains and Ubers. So the woman said, "Well, maybe you're just not cut out for the journalism job." I said, "Well, just to let you know, the first story I ever had published was from the White House. So I think I can handle your school committee just fine in the future if you kindly let me know."
Oh, good for you.
And I
Now,
just find that I have to go out of the box and be more aggressive, almost just to be treated with dignity.
yes. And that's what I found I've had to do too. And personally, I don't like being aggressive, but I
No.
find at times if I want to survive and have a career and be able to function in society, you got to have that little bit of sass in you or they'll step on you.
Yes. And after my employment discrimination experiences, I found that I just couldn't do that. I had a boss who was invoking seizures
Oh
by
my
pounding on my
goodness.
desk from behind because she wanted someone else to get the job. And just to be subjected to that was just horrific. And
Did
then the
they
work.
did they take any action against her? Was she disciplined for that?
No, that was the horrible thing. And what she would do is while I was having a seizure, she would change the work plan and then say, "Oh, well, she couldn't comply with the work plan." even though it wasn't the one that I had been following originally, but she happens, to be liked by the head of the nonprofit. So she was never disciplined. I finally got an attorney through the Epilepsy Foundation New England at that time and said, look, if you don't treat me equitably, I'm suing and I'm making sure that this is public. So we came to an agreement and I left on my terms.
Good for you.
But I just said it's unconscionable. If you're serving, it was actually a nonprofit that serves the elders and supposedly people with disabilities. To treat someone with disabilities was unconscionable to me.
Oh, there's no words
So
to describe my frustration in hearing something like that. I
it
can't,
is
I'm telling you right now, myself representing people with epilepsy and giving support with other people with neurological disorders and disability in general. If I ever had anybody who worked for me, if I ever caught them committing such a disgusting act, I'd be like, pack your bags, walk out the door, and don't come back in it.
yes,
Goodbye.
and she's right in front of the sort of upper management office, and people just like, oh yeah, well Mary Ellen gets like that. No, you don't come up behind somebody and pound on the desk and scream into their ear to purposely invoke a seizure.
That's abuse. I'm sorry. There's no other word to describe it. That is abuse. And I'm so sorry that you had to deal with such disgusting immoral behavior. It truly was. But
It just really gets to me, but it's made me the person I am. So I just look at every piece of my puzzle and say, at this point, thank you for this gift. It's taken me a long time to rationalize that, but thank you for discriminating against me because you've challenged me to become an advocate.
exactly. Same here with my life experiences. Is there anything else you'd like to share with our viewers today?
Oh, I would just like to thank everyone for viewing and you for allowing me the ability to communicate my story. If it's of help to anyone, I just want to show people that you can do it. They might say, oh, you can't drive, oh, this or that. But if you really are passionate about what you're meant to do, you can find a way, find support from people such as yourself, and just go for it.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, that is all the time we have for today. Again, I want to thank Mary Ellen for coming and taking part. To see the great work we are doing, like our social media pages and subscribe to our YouTube channel. We invite you to visit our website at www.defeatingepilepsy.org to see how we are making a difference for the epilepsy community. Thank you for your support, and together we will defeat epilepsy. Take care.